Preparing to take the GRE can seem daunting, but with the right systems in place, you'll be able to make quick advances in your knowledge and your test-taking skills. In this video, we're going to talk about exactly how you can get an excellent score on the GRE with a few components of study strategy. Hi, I'm Tony. I'm a linguistics PhD student, and I focus on helping people learn a language or improve their skills more quickly and easily. If that sounds like something you'd like, check out my channel or subscribe below. Now let's get into it. The GRE. The GRE, or Graduate Record Examination, is an admissions test for graduate programs, mainly in the US and Canada. It's a way to show graduate programs, from MBAs to JDs to PhDs, that you know your stuff and that you'll do well in their programs. Like a lot of things when it comes to education and work, institutions want evidence that you'll succeed before they let you in. And the GRE is one way of showing this. It's no longer required for many schools, but even so, it could be a good way to stand out among other applicants. I personally took it because at the time, it was required by many more schools than it is now. But it also allowed me to show what I felt was growth in my academic record, capped off with good scores on the test. But we'll get into whether or not it's a good idea for you to take it later in the video. I took the test several years ago, before I studied my master's. I studied for something like 2 months, starting sometime in September and working until the beginning of November. When I took the test. I only took the test one time, and I took it at a testing center, which was required at the time, that you go in a physical space that ETS, who owns the test, has rented out and has computers there where you take the test by yourself but in a controlled space. Now they have the option to take it at home also. As part of my prep, I laid out my goals, set a schedule, took practice tests, and prepared in a couple of other ways, which we'll get into soon. In the end, I got a 169 on verbal, a 164 on quant, and a 6.0 on analytical writing. The outline of the test is basically this. The analytical writing section is always first, and it gives you one prompt, which is to analyze an issue, and you've got 30 minutes to do it. Then, in random order, you have 2 sections of verbal reasoning and 2 sections of quantitative reasoning. One verbal and one quant is going to be 12 questions, and the other verbal and the other quant are going to be 15 questions. So now let's get into how you can prepare for the different tasks the GRE will require you to perform. There are 5 things I incorporated into my preparation for the GRE. Component number 1 is flashcards. There are flashcards available from different companies for both the verbal and the math portions of the GRE. I got mine from Manhattan Prep, and I thought they were great. They have an essential words pack, as well as an advanced words pack, 500 cards each. And when I was studying, they had a math pack. Now it doesn't seem like they have a math pack, but other companies do offer math flashcards, specifically for the GRE. You can find some links to these in the description of this video. Using flashcards is one of the most important parts of my preparation. I took out a certain number each day, went through them, putting the ones I got right in one stack and the ones I got wrong in a different stack, and going through the ones I got wrong until I got them right. Then I would set those aside, and the next day, get a new set. It's very quick, very straightforward, and it gives you practice calling up the information quickly and without hesitation as to whether or not you'll get the right answer. This is an important mindset to get into because the test requires this sort of quick application of knowledge. The next thing I did was use timed problem sets. Problem sets are a crucial part of putting the learning that you're doing into practice. Think of these as part way between flashcards and a practice test. More structured, but not quite as long. Importantly, you do these problem sets in a timed setting. The principle for the timed problem sets is that you're getting better at doing the test in the conditions of a test. And this brings up an important point, which is that for better or worse, the GRE mostly tests how good you are at taking the GRE. It isn't mainly a matter of knowing a lot of things. For example, when we think of verbal questions, you might have a slightly different understanding of what a word means compared to what it means in the context of the GRE. The important thing isn't to try to work out how what you think it means fits into the test. The idea is to understand how the test is thinking about the word, and then applying that knowledge to the test itself. On the math side, you're not really learning math concepts in depth. You're learning quick concepts and tricks that you apply to problems in a quick manner. The main thing about the GRE is that you're going to feel like there isn't enough time to do all the questions. So that's one big thing you're practicing. But at the end of the day, what you're doing is you're learning to recognize the patterns and the logic of the GRE, along with the basic information it requires, and then gaining the ability to apply this in a test setting. All that is to say, do timed problem sets. The way I did this was to give myself something like 15 minutes for 10 questions. That mimics the amount of time you're going to have on the actual test. Then I would work as quickly as I could through those problems, focusing on speed rather than trying to analyze each problem in depth to get it right. What you don't do is give yourself extra time to make sure you get the problems right. You do the problems in the time that you have and see how many you can get. Then you check whether or not you got the answers right, score yourself, and learn for the next set. You can think about this a little bit like reading faster. I recently read a book, 10 Days to Faster Reading. And what it explains is that you actually usually get more information when you're reading than you think. So sometimes we want to read each word sound for sound. But we can actually move much faster than that and still retain the information. Similarly, here, as you go through these practice sets, you want to trust yourself that you know the thing and that you're applying it correctly. And then at the end, you see what you got wrong and you fix it for the next time. But you have to move fast. So where do you find these problem sets? My recommendation here, and there's a link in the description below, is the Manhattan Prep 5-pound book. This is what I use, and I think it was extremely high quality. I didn't get through maybe half of it, and still it helped me do well on the test. They have 1,400 questions divided up in sections by difficulty, and I found that setup very helpful for getting started with easier problems and gradually moving on to more advanced ones. ETS, who owns the test, also publishes their own practice guides, and I used those as well, and they were helpful. The third thing you need to do is practice tests. I did one of these every couple of weeks while I was preparing. This, of course, is the best way to see if you can apply the skills and the knowledge you're learning in test conditions, aside from taking an actual test. I got mine from ETS. They have a package with 2 practice tests, and then they sell 3 more tests individually. They sell these under the name Power Prep. I ended up purchasing 3. I got the 2 that came in a pack and then 1 extra as well. There's also something like this in the 5-pound book. I don't remember how closely these mimic the actual test. Either way, the ones that are offered by ETS are very helpful. And on these practice tests, there's one thing you do that you're not doing in flashcards and problem sets, and that's the analytical writing component. As I mentioned earlier, on the new tests, this portion is always first, and it's only 1 task. On the old test, it used to be 2. So when you take the practice test, you're going to do all the sections of the test. 2 of quantitative reasoning, 2 of verbal reasoning, and 1 analytical writing. While you won't receive a score for the analytical writing, you'll be able to review it yourself. And that brings us to the 4th component of our preparation plan. You can and should be reviewing each type of preparation you're doing. This means that you're reviewing the flashcards, the problem sets, and the practice tests. Let's talk about how you're going to review for each type of preparation. To review flashcards, you do something like this. You take the flashcards you're going to do for the day, and you start going through them. As you go, you get some wrong, and those you put in the back of the stack to see again before the end of the day. You keep going through the ones you put at the back of the stack until you get them all right, meaning that you get the right definition if it's verbal, or the right application of the right math principle if it's math. So here, you're reviewing each card as you go. You look at the front, try to do the problem, turn it around, and if you got it right, you put it in the right stack and you're done with it. If you got it wrong, you put it in the back of the stack and you see it again, and you keep seeing it until you get it right. And that's the beauty of flashcards. If you get it right, you know right away. And if you get it wrong, you know right away and can practice again and again. One way that you might do extra review of flashcards is to take the ones that you had particular problem with on one day and add them to the stack for the next day, so that you're not just getting them right by the end of the first day, but then you have another chance to try them again and hopefully get them right on the first try. To review timed sets, you'll do 1 timed set, do as many problems as you can in the allotted time, and then review it immediately. Meaning that if you do more than 1 set in 1 sitting, you're going to review each one after you've done it, and then go on to the next set. Note what you got wrong, but also what you got right for each set, and then reflect on why you got the problems wrong that you did, but also why you got the ones right that you did. This will help you to reflect on the logic, again, of the GRE and what it's asking you to do. If you got it wrong, was it an issue with the knowledge required, where you thought something was true but it ended up not being? Was it an issue with recognizing what the problem was asking for, where you knew something that was true but you applied it to a problem that didn't need that knowledge? This would be, for example, like applying the formula for the circumference of a circle when what you needed was the area. Or was it that you knew the right stuff, knew how to apply it, but just didn't have time to do it? This might be due to being nervous about the problem, or just not being able to apply the concept quickly enough. Finally, it could be purely time related. Were there problems you just didn't get to? Note that you're normally served well by answering as many questions as you can. So when you're low on time, consider speeding up a little bit and going through problems a little faster to answer ones that you can definitely get even in the shorter amount of time. What you're doing here is not answering randomly, which can also be a good approach. What you're doing is you're taking a little less time than you would like to, but still looking at the problem, considering it a moment, and using your best guess given the information you have and the knowledge you have to apply, and answering the question quickly. When you reflect on what you got right, ask if there's a piece of GRE logic that you're getting right and that you can apply next time and every time after. If you did a calculation more quickly than you have before, maybe discovering a new, shorter way to do it, check that it'll work in other circumstances, and then remember that shortcut to apply in the future. You review the quantitative reasoning and verbal reasoning sections of a practice test in the same manner. Finally, when you're reviewing the analytical writing portion, you check it against the examples that the test maker gives you as examples of how an answer could look. These will be whole answers, so whole essays, that are scored at different levels. The levels go from 1 to 6. So you'll be able to work out if your answer was between a 3 and a 4, exactly a 5, almost a 6, and then you'll be able to change it accordingly. In order to change it, it's not just about knowing what score you got and what score you want to get. It's about, again, looking at the pieces, deconstructing it, seeing if the body of your answer looks a lot like the body of their answer, or if your introduction and conclusion tie together like theirs did. You want to review content, structure, flow, and anything else which seems to be the same or different between your essay and theirs. It's important to not be too optimistic. You don't want to rate yourself too high. But on the other hand, you can see if you're already doing well. This is a great opportunity not just to see how you did, but also think about how you developed your answer and how you might do it differently in the future. Finally, we want to talk about schedule and timeline. One thing that I did was to set myself goals. I wanted to do as well as I could on the GRE. I set my goals as reviewing 100% of the flashcards and doing as many problems as I could in the 5-pound book and other books. Then I took a practice test, saw where I was at, and set a schedule and timeline for improving my scores to where I wanted them to be. This is a question both of time, overall commitment of time in hours, as well as the stretch of time, say 2 months, that you have to work with in order to get your scores to where you want them to be. So determine when it is you want to take the test, how much time you can put in per week, and how often you want to sit down to work on these things. First, it's important to take a practice test to know where you're at. Then you sit down and you set your goals. Depending on the schools you're targeting, you may need to get top scores, but then again, you may not. If you don't need it, consider setting your goals in accordance with the scores you want to be getting. If you want to hit in the 80th percentile, consider that you may not have to review all of the flashcards, and you also may do fewer problem sets as well as practice tests. To get a top score, on the other hand, may mean doing all of the flashcards and doing as many problem sets as you can. Let's break down a possible schedule by type of practice. First, flashcards. As I mentioned, you might have something like 1,500 flashcards to get through. If you do 30 flashcards a day, it'll take you 50 days. If you do 60 flashcards a day, it'll take you 25 days to get through all of them. If you get through them faster, it'll also give you time to go back and review them if you feel you need it. Consider though that these flashcards don't have to take too long each day. Because they're so fast-paced, you can go through a flashcard in maybe 10 seconds. For some, you may move more slowly, especially if you have to figure out what you got wrong and how you're going to apply it differently the next time. But even if we assume about 30 seconds per flashcard, you can do 10 in about 5 minutes, which means you could do 60 in about half an hour. For the time sets, as we talked about before, you want to work out about how much time you have per question given the time you're going to have on the test. You'll have about 1.5 minutes for verbal questions and 1.75 minutes for math questions. If, for example, we use the average time per question for verbal questions, you can take 15 minutes and do 10 questions in those 15 minutes. In an hour, you'll have done about 40 questions. Now keep in mind that the 5-pound book has about 1,400 questions in it. And like I said, I didn't get through them all, and you're not going to have to either. If you spend an average of an hour a day on problem sets, you can do 40 questions, and it'll take you 35 days to get through the whole book. It's not bad. If you do 2 hours per day, you're doing 80 questions, and this would take about half the time to get through the whole book, 18 days. But remember that this doesn't include the time that you're going to need to review your problem sets once you're done with them. And I would strongly suggest taking the time to review rather than just speeding through and getting to more sets of problems. For practice tests, I found that you don't need more than what you can get through ETS. If you use all 5 of them that they offer, 1 when you get started, and then 4 throughout the rest of your preparation, I think you'll be in a great place. I only used 3 myself, and it worked out well. If you did use them all, and you had 2 months to prepare, then you might take 1 right at the beginning and then take 1 every 2 weeks after that. If you have 1 month to prepare, you might take 1 each week just to see how things are going, depending on how you're feeling about your prep. That might feel a little overwhelming, but keep in mind that as you're doing practice tests, you're doing exactly what you're going to need to do on test day, preparing not just your knowledge, but your ability to apply that knowledge to the test. And this will make a huge difference. Finally, as you're doing all this, you're going to want a tracker to follow your progress. You need to know, especially on practice tests, if you're improving each week or every couple of weeks. I suggest using Excel or some other spreadsheet software to put together a simple box system where each practice test you put in a single box, the scores that you got on each section, and then the percentiles that each of those scores represent. Then, below, you quantify your improvement from the previous test. Don't get discouraged if on one test your score actually goes down. Sometimes it's an up and down journey to get to where we're going. And that's why with this system, you're preparing in several ways and doing the things you're going to need to do on the test repeatedly over time. So that's my program for studying for the GRE. But there's still a couple questions you might be asking. First, should you take the GRE for a PhD or other non-professional program? And second, if you have the option for a program like the MBA, should you take the GRE or an equivalent test? On the first question, I buy the argument that it's still important to take the GRE if you can. When I took the test, I felt like it was a good, focused way to show grad schools that I had what it took and I was prepared to be admitted to their programs. I wanted a good way to let them know that I was what they were looking for. In the end, the school that accepted me didn't even take a GRE. In my opinion, if, weighed against the other ways you might be preparing for grad school applications, you feel that this is one of the best opportunities, absolutely take it. On the second question of whether you should take the GRE or an equivalent test, I have a little insight. At the time I was studying for the GRE, my wife was too, but she was looking at MBAs, not doctoral programs. So she had to make the decision between the GMAT, which is the MBA specific test, and the GRE, which is more general. She ended up doing both. But the advice we found then, and I think this is true still, is that if you're particularly strong at writing, take the GRE. The GMAT, or the Graduate Management Admission Test, doesn't have an analytical writing section, and instead has a data analysis section. So if you feel you're more quantitatively inclined, or simply less inclined on the verbal parts, you should go that route. Whichever way you decide to go, the principles discussed in this video are going to help you out. Practice frequently, in small ways and large. Test yourself in actual test-like conditions. And as much as you need to learn the knowledge, pay attention how you're applying the knowledge in the way the test wants you to apply it. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below. I hope you enjoyed the video. Leave a like if you did. My channel is about language and learning and improving languages more easily and more quickly, so check it out if that interests you. We'll see you in the next one.